half together, we will meet Kali. There she is, on the overhead projector. And Kali is the consort, the partner of Shiva, especially in his role as the destroyer. But Kali is a figure who is untamed, wild, and similar to Shiva in his nature, that he stands outside of society and social norms. And so she is that power of Shiva that will cut through anything and stands for no nonsense, no illusion. And if that comes in the form of society taboos, there is also no mercy. The only thing that is important is the truth of being. So any social patterns or individual patterns, behaviors, beliefs, attachments that are creating a distorted perception and therefore also a decaying, everything that is dragging life down is then going to be cut away because it's old, it's diseased, it's distorted, it's unuseful, it's disharmonious, it's disruptive, it's holding us back, holding life back. So just as we would seek to get rid of the toxins from our body, to break them down and destroy them through the fire of the digestive system, in the same way, the toxicity of life and the illusion of Maya is being broken down by the power, or by the awareness of Shiva expressed through the power of Kali. She is also helping to kill off everything that is distorted. And one of the things that keeps us trapped under the spell of Maya is the function of ahankar, or the ego maker. And the ego maker is primarily there to keep us as an individual unit that can survive in life, so it has its role. But beyond that immediate existential role, it can then become a distorting function, because it tends to work with identification, attachment, belief, preconception. So there is an experience that occurs to us. Somebody shouts at us from a distance. And actually we don't know if the shout is about to us or to somebody else, but we maybe assume that it's us because we identify with it. And even if it is at us, it might just be because that person is having a bad day and it's actually got nothing to do with us. But we identify with it. And when we identify with it, we also attach to it. We ingest it. And it becomes part of us. And we get like a negative charge, which then gets stored somewhere in our system, in our energy body, in our physical body, as perhaps latent anger that we then later need to offload in some other situation. These little packets of, for example, anger get carried around. And sometimes they just stay inside our system, perhaps creating some disease like cancer. And where they lodge in our system is creating unawareness. There is an unawareness in there. And so this tendency to identify and attach and create as a belief system, everybody's against me, they're always shouting at me, life is unfair, yeah, for example. This is also creating a belief system that will tend to close our life flow down, and it will also keep us in the mind, in the film of Maya, and help to keep us separated from the source, from the true being that we are. You know, sometimes we find ourselves in situations and relationships that we think are, you know, very important, very sacred, with family, with friends, with places for which we feel a lot of affection. But a cycle of time has passed, and an old chapter has to close, and a new chapter has to open, has to begin. And actually, even though we have a lot of affection for the place or the company, it's time to move on. But we don't feel ready to move on because it's scary, and it's unknown, and it's new, and we don't know if we're going to be able to cope with all of that. And so we're still hanging on to the old, but actually life is saying, no, you must go to the next step, because here is only decay. You're not going to grow, you're going to wither, even though maybe the friends are nice, the family are nice, the place is nice, but it's not suitable for you with where your consciousness is now. And so Kali will, if you don't do it gracefully and of your own accord and say, okay, I let go and I move on, or I take the step into the unknown, then Kali will cut and push you. And this can be very frightening. But it is actually a blessing in disguise.
Of course, you say thank you.
Afterwards, in retrospect, when you realize, you know, you've met the unknown, you've found the courage, you've found inner strength, new strength to meet the situation and develop new capacities, then you say, wow, wasn't it such a good thing that I got kicked out of that old situation that I didn't want to leave? It's like, you know, you wouldn't want to have a baby stay beyond its term. It has to be eliminated when it's due date. But the baby doesn't necessarily want to, because it's nice and cozy, but it is getting rather tight and straight. You know, so then the nature of life is to kick you out and move you on. And so, you know, as life is always this sapanama process, you know, birth, life, death, rebirth. If we keep hanging on at the moment of na, and not wanting to finish the last cycle, we don't want to go into na. We're afraid of going into na. But if we don't go into the death, how can we be reborn into ma, and through ma into sa for the next life? So Kali is pushing us along that flow of life. And also, you know, every time there is a death, then our identity, as it was, partly dies. And as we go into a new situation, a new identity is born. And even on the most obvious sense, when we leave this body and this earth, there is a death. But life goes on, and there's a part of us that is also reborn. What matters is that the true being that we are, the light that is projecting through the film, creating the images, is always going to be there, regardless of whether one film is taken out and another film is put in its place. Okay, so when Kali acts to cut through the old, she acts in order to also help us become aware of our true nature, that we are the light and not the film and its projected images. So she is cutting our attachment to the film, to the images, and saying, and in that moment when we fall into despair, because everything, carpet has been pulled out from under our feet, then we have nothing left to reflect on. And in that moment, often we have the opportunity to realize, actually, I am just that presence. That is the real part of me. And then Kali has really delivered you to that awareness that it's Shiva. And if we see this image here, we see that she is standing on top of a very static, silent, passive Shiva awareness. And she will deliver you to the Shiva, who is the underlying presence of our nature. And you see in this image here that she has this necklace of skulls. This is like the Sapanama wave, you know, going through one life into another life, and each time there is a death. So you see all the old death that she has cut away as we move, and it's like the shedding of old snake skins. And we see her sword that she uses to cut the head of the ego that is so self-identified that it goes into distorted and perverted tendencies, which in the mythological stories of the gods, the demons, that the ego was portrayed as the different demons. And so she will cut off the head of your ego that is holding on and not allowing you to flow with the cycle of life. But we also see that her upper right hand is in the same position as many of the gods, including Shiva, which is the position of a blessing, which indicates that her presence and her nature is actually auspicious. It is actually benevolent, and it is there to help you, not to destroy you, because you anyway, in your reality, cannot be destroyed. Only the false ego can be destroyed, and that's what she's about. So the name Kali is about culling the ego, killing off the ego, and thereby also transcending time, which is Kal as well, so that she can deliver you to Shiva. In her lower left hand, we see that she's holding a bowl, and that bowl is full of blood. It's not that she is a bloodthirsty vampire, but there is a mythological story connected to also what's going on and the images that she's holding. And it is told in this story that there was a particular demon, so a particular force of ego, that was getting the upper hand. Any drop of blood that came from him and that landed on the ground, from that drop of blood, Bijratka, would spring up another Bijratka. So it was almost impossible to kill this guy. And there'd been a raging battle with some of the minor goddesses called the Matrikas, and they couldn't overpower him and his army of little Bijratkas. And then they called in Durga, and Durga had a go with all of her different powers and different swords, different weapons that the gods had given her. And she couldn't overpower Bijratka. And so Kali was called for, and Kali came to the rescue. And in order that the drops of blood from this terrible demon wouldn't fall on the ground and produce more of them, she went around catching his blood and then drinking it. And also with her tongue. And that way she was able to ingest the virus of this reproducing distorted energy, which is what it is. And we see that actually her function there is a bit like the white blood cells in the red blood. So when there is a virus in the blood, you need your army of white blood cells to eat the virus. And so Kali was acting in this way. And we see also in our life that, you know, the ego is a bit like a virus in that it keeps us in a condition of dis-ease. No, we're no longer in ease when we're holding on to the old. When we have this attachment of the ego and identification, then, you know, the anger or the trauma or the grief or the shame or the guilt, you know, all the negative things, the greed, this all lodges in some way in our body. It might be as excess toxins in our mama points. It might be as tensions in our muscles. It might be accumulation of diseased cells in particular locations. And in those zones where we have this disease, the awareness of being cannot penetrate. You know, we all have zones where there is some kind of imbalance going on, or stiffness, or something's not working. And these are the parts that we're unable to get our awareness to really go inside and look. It's like there is a blind spot in this area. And it's also uncomfortable to go in and look at it, and so we tend not to, and then it gets worse. Yeah. And this, you know, this is an occurrence of the old energy and attachment. And so Kali will tend to provoke us to meet this imprint of trauma or grief or whatever. And when we work with the Shakti dance exercises, and we realize how we work on the chakras, on the meridians, on the nadis, and how the illness in the body is also radiating through these nadis and meridians and chakras, and also the related emotions. And we experience how we're doing these flowing asanas with the stretches, which is like blowing through a straw, these nadis and the meridians, to clear the path from the old blockages that are still hanging in there. And we see that this is a very transformative aspect of the Shakti dance, which also brings healing. Again, it's a bit like Kali that is eating away and cutting away that which is diseased, the karmic tendencies that are hanging in our body. And these karmic tendencies, which are creating our misalignment in our posture and the pain in our body, these are also completely somatically interrelated with our psyche and a belief system. I'm no good, I'm never going to make it work for me. You know, and the heart sinks and the shoulders come forward and it gets crusted. And the more I think that, the more I manifest it in my body. And then I have to do this exit, and then, oh, it's painful, oh, and it's Kali going, come on, let's work through this. And then as we work through it, all those feelings of I'm no good, and they start to come, or the grief starts to come up, and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to look at that. But it's an opportunity to let it pass through and release. And then as that happens, we actually find then that our belief system, as we begin to straighten and open out, is like, oh wow, maybe I'm not that bad after all, and oh wow, maybe there are opportunities to love life and be loved. And that kind of shifts. And we find that as that's shifting, more awareness is coming into our body. Those blind spots are being filled with new flows of prana and chi that awaken us. And then we find that more and more, as we release these old spellbound patterns of Maya, that the awareness comes in and starts to shine through more clearly, and the film becomes more transparent and more harmonious. And we begin to manifest directly that Shiva awareness, that presence of Shiva comes through clearly, and we become that perfect yogi. We become that clear manifestation of being. And that is the moment of self-realization. So we see that Kali is the power of Shiva to see through the illusion, and the burning of that awareness as it cuts through.
Can I ask a question? How do you recognize so in this Satanama process? Sometimes it's difficult to let go because it's safer, it's the known. But sometimes what happens is you are tricked into believing that if you let go, something else, somewhere else will be different. So you end up like living with your partner or changing a job, but then you end up in the same place after a while. So in my understanding, this was actually not Kali doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we break off the cycle before the cycle is complete, thinking that the cycle is complete, but actually we haven't. So there is also another aspect where we need to learn to complete what's called the cycle of success. Because once you've gone through the whole process, then completion brings success and also the insight of having completed all the aspects of that process. And the thing is that, if you then break it off before you finish the cycle, then you will be put in another situation where you will be presented with the same challenge, possibly in a slightly different way. And so if you then discover that you've got the same challenge that you had last time, again in another way, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because maybe meeting it in a slightly different way, with a slightly more evolved set of experiences, what you had last time, it can enable you to meet and recognize the tendency that you couldn't meet and recognize so it's not all bad. But then it's important to recognize and meet it and go through it. And so, it's okay, maybe if you break it off once or even twice because you still weren't ready, and get it right the third time. Because what you don't want to do is to be keeping on breaking the cycle. Because once you get into the habit of breaking a cycle, then it's very difficult to complete. And a habit begins after 3 times. So, and what we also see about Kali in this image are her eyes. Now most of the other goddesses of Shakti, when you see them in the pictures, they have these kind of languid, half open, half closed, meditative eyes. Yeah, and Kali is like here, present, aware. No illusion, no funny business, just straight to the point. So let's have a little experience of her in the last hour. So it's going to be a short session, not so many exercises in each phase, but we will have enough to have a taste.